Good morning, companions, and thank you for joining us this morning for our Select Master Education. My name is David Dumonceau, and I am the Grand Archmaster of the Cryptic Masons of Minnesota. My goal this year, or my task this year, was to provide the Sir Knights of Minnesota with some education of some type. And my thought on this was let's get to the point where we've all walked through it, we've all been through it, we all know the ritual. Let's start talking about the whys and why we do this and what does it mean to us and that kind of stuff, so that when we do put on our ritual, that we have a little bit more background and we can come at it from a whole different perspective. So with that, I have talked to our presenter, and he has agreed to help us on this trail today. And I would like to introduce the Deputy General Grand Master of the General Council of Cryptic Masons International for the 20 to 23 triennial, William G. Snyder, or Bill. Good morning, Bill.
Appreciate it, David. Yeah, I think what we're going to try to talk about here today is going to fit right into what you've described as your goals. We have, in particular, with the cryptic degrees, or what we know as the cryptic rite, we have a set of ritualistic connections that are not adequately explained. So I think we have a set of degrees that are inadequately explained, that are described in various ways by the so-called Masonic historians. And I say so-called because I think most of you on this call have already experienced this sense of, you read something by a Pike or a Mackey or even Anderson or someone else, and you go, you know what? I'm not quite sure that they have a source for what they're saying. I'm not quite sure that they're not just passing on their own intuitive belief about the degrees and then stating it as a fact that they got somewhere else as a historical fact, or that they don't have any damn idea at all about what they're talking about. And I'm with you on that, because that's what I experienced. When I came through Masonic lines in the state of Missouri, and I reached that point where they said, you know, we need someone stupid enough to be in the Grand Council of Cryptic Masons line. And I say that because that is exactly how it was phrased. Because in Missouri, we have a great sense of humor about all of our lines. And in Missouri in particular, at that time in the early 2000s, Cryptic Masonry was at low ebb. It was like, well, you know, it's required since 1966 to go on to be a Sir Knight. They're really beautiful, wonderful little degrees. You can do them in 20 minutes, in certain circumstances, and everybody can receive these degrees and maybe even get the title Super Excellent Master. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing, but they're not important. Well, after I looked into this, because I said, you know, if I'm going to be part of this system to maintain these degrees, this Royal Master, this Select Master, this Super Excellent Master that seemed to be sort of a big play that had been disjointed and belonged over at the Scottish Rite on a stage with 40 or 50 people putting it on. And then this little thing called Silver Trowel, if you became an illustrious master. And I'm using that just to distinguish it from worshipful. But when you're the master of a council, it was, oh, well, then you're eligible to get the Silver Trowel. And I found out, well, that's something that came out of the state of North Carolina. Well, with all that, I ended up with this impression initially of, what in the world are these degrees about? I came away after doing some study with the firm belief that the cryptic rite in all its glory are equally as important as any other degree or any other order or any other system, whether it's the rites of Memphis, the Scottish Rite, the York Rite, the Shrine, or even the craft degrees. And I want to kind of cover that with you on Select Master. So here's what Bill Snyder's telling you as the amateur Masonic historian that he is. And I pride myself in the fact that, as you all know, all those other Masonic historians are just as amateur as I am. But here's this belief. These degrees, including Select Master, are equally as important, if not more important, than any other degree or system or order that you will encounter in your Masonic life. You say, well, Bill, these things are fluff. You've got this one degree where Hiram Abiff goes around in a circle. He's not sure where the word is, but he says it's buried over there. And Adoniram is suddenly enlightened. And then we've got this, and then Hiram Abiff disappears from the scene. Then we've got this degree, Select Master, where some dude named Zabud burst into the wrong place, is almost put to death, and instead they sacrifice another guy and he gets to live because he gets to be part of the 27. Doesn't even seem fair. And then there's Super Excellent Master, and it's this big play about the infidelity of the last king of Israel. And it's really all turns on how well somebody plays King Zedekiah. And then finally, Silver Trowel, where an older brother of King Solomon thinks he's more qualified to be the king of Israel, the successor to King David. So that's those 4 degrees. And that's what I think most of you have walked away with the impression of. But let's go into into the Select Master degree as an example only. I'm telling you, there's much more in these degrees than what you've walked away with as an initial impression. And part of that is our Masonic ancestors have done a bad job in helping us understand what they intended for us to know. In the Select Master degree, and I want you to take some particular attention. And so if you have it nearby or later, go in and look at this, because I want you to be able to verify this. But I'm not going to use Missouri's ritual or Minnesota's. I'm going to go to the General Grand one, which again is just there for your instruction on how you can structure this degree's lecture. But in that lecture, you're going to find some of the points that are not emphasized in the ritualistic performance of the degree, the conferral of the degree, but they're important. Somebody, somewhere, thought these were important things for you to know. And I think we should take notice of that and figure out what it is they're trying to tell us. So let's first begin with, for those of you who were able to be at the presentation by General Grand earlier or last year about the importance of being Zabud. All right, Zabud is a particular friend of King Solomon's. Anyone want to put on chat what that means? You're going back to the Canaanite term that is translated as particular friend. Who is Zabud? What you know about him from the lecture is, and from the degree, he has come through a door that is connected to the most remote apartment of King Solomon. In other words, let's put this in White House terms. He has a very high security clearance. A very high security clearance. He's in the executive part of the king's palace or the mansion. He is in the Oval Office, and he has, and even perhaps even the personal residence of King Solomon. He has found or knew about the door that King Solomon uses to go to the east of the Ninth Arch. Have you thought about that? So who is this Zabud? Anyone give me a meaning for particular friend? Okay, well, I'm going to disappoint you. And again, I have this bias and prejudice that you'll find in all amateur Masonic historians. My own experience as a former prosecutor and former county attorney, well, particular friend means lawyer, special counsel, advisor. Yeah, right there in Masonry, they've got a lawyer. And I can find this in other places. So while you're choking that down this morning, going, why in the world would Masonry ever have a lawyer in a degree? Well, I can tell you other instances where there are. There's one in Super Excellent Master, a guy named Gedaliah. Ah, very good. Thank you, Brian. So go to that. But this special counsel, this special advisor, it doesn't mean childhood chum. King Solomon may have known Zabud from that time period, but they have a special trust and a special relationship. Many of you know in White Houses of the past, and if you go back into history, Roosevelt, both Roosevelts, and then in particular Truman's White House, which is the model for every White House since, even with the Kennedy changes in the White House, it's still the same structure. That structure is built very much like the way the royal palace operated in Israel. It's almost identical. So there's this special advisor to King Solomon. That's Zabud. He's important. He knows what the secrets of the kingdom, if you will. But yet, he is not in the select of 27. Odd, isn't it? The select of 27 is a separate group. Now, the lecture says it's, I think, 22 men of Gabal, and then Adoniram, and a guy named Akishar or Ahishar. You know who Ahishar is. You know who Adoniram is, or believe you do. We know the Adoniram is represented by the captain of the guard. Everyone following? Okay. So Ahishar is who? He's the comedy relief moment in Freemasonry. In the middle of the conferral of the Yorkite degrees and orders, we have this guy that's asleep at the door that gets Zabud in trouble. Ahishar's name is translated as brother of a prince. In other words, he's related to King Solomon. That's why he's in the select of 27, which means that Adoniram probably has a similar blood link. I want you to now all of you become amateur students of biblical history. In biblical history, there's always this thing of, well, the only people we can trust are the ones of our bloodline. Anything outside that bloodline cannot be trusted. But yet in the Bible, with God's favor, consistently, there are those that come from outside that bloodline, from outside that family, who, through their special talents, because of their dedication and faith in God, they become a trusted member of that royal household. And in particular, as we know from the Brits, as we know from our allied Masonic degrees, and if you're not a member of AMD, I'm pretty sure most of you on this call will eventually be that, because it means you're a Mason who's worth being invited. But in that AMD, in the AMD, we have a thing called the Order of the Secret Monitor, or as you would know it biblically, the Order of Jonathan and David. King David, on his way to being king, is not directly a member of the family of King Saul. Yet King Saul's son, Jonathan and David, have a special bond, a special friendship. And Masonically, that is that whole idea of not brothers by blood, but brothers by choice and adoption. You've heard that term. That is a consistent theme of Freemasonry. That the brotherhood we have is closer than a blood tie, and most importantly, more reliable. not one that will be met with a result of betrayal. And you find that in biblical history. There's always somebody in the bloodline who wants to be jealous, who wants the power, or who will betray the king or the ruler who is involved. It's there all the time. And yet, the saving grace is almost always someone in whom you could have that special trust, that Masonic trust. So I tell you all that because you have a High Shar who holds an important position in the Selected 27. This is sort of the shadow government of Israel. Its purpose is the building of the temple, but yet they meet at night, not just to do work, but to discuss the plans of the greater kingdom of Israel. And that greater kingdom of Israel includes what? Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram Abith. So they're not just there for a building project. That's near completion. We know that at this time, when you match this up. So you have a situation where they've got a greater purpose, something that's going to go beyond the building project, something that has great influence, much as, the conspiracy theorists will say about Freemasonry. It transcends government. It transcends religion. It has a life of its own. It has a blessing from God of its own, as some would say. So here is what we come to, is an important decision, a life or death decision between a High Shar, your brother, your cousin, if you will, your nephew, as it might be, and then this person you trust. Zabud. He's not a relative. He broke the rules. That's what's described in the decree. And the leadership assumes when you go to that ritual that it was his curiosity and overzealousness. That's what's referred to. And that's what most of you have walked away from with that in mind about the decree. Keep secrets. Don't stick your nose into any place it doesn't belong. That's a good lesson. But I think there's much more, because remember, it's a false assumption by the leadership. They are going in there and saying, well, we presume you got here because you were curious and overzealous. You just wanted to know what was on the other side of the door. You're not a part of the Selected 27. You just wanted to get in here and find out what was going on because you've asked about it before, as portrayed in the decree or mentioned in the lecture. And King Solomon told you not to, you didn't need to know anything about that, what was going on, about the arches or the ninth arch or any of that. You didn't need to be a part of that, but that someday a door would be left open. Everybody going along with me on this? Isn't that pretty much generally what's in that decree? Okay. But we know from the lecture, why was Zabud in King Solomon's most remote apartment? Why did he notice the door being open? Why did he go through that door without seeking to be announced, to pass through guards? Why did he do that? It says he had some particular business, important business to discuss with King Solomon. I don't know. Maybe he was coming to tell him, hey, we found out there's a balloon that's over the country. We need to do something about it. I don't know. But the point is, he came there on official government business. Don't dismiss Zabud as being the guy that was just curious. And don't dismiss yourself as someone who's overly curious when you ask someone about a particular facet of Masonry. When I started in 1999, petitioned in 98 as a Mason, I was taught early on, don't ever ask how to become a member of the Red Cross. Don't ever ask how to become a member of York Rite Sovereign College or AMD or anything else like that. Just don't ask. I was told in due time, those will come to you. Modernly, particularly those of you who are younger Masons, that's a stupid rule, isn't it? All you're asking is, how does the process work? You're not even necessarily saying, I want to belong to something, but all of you have experienced this where you say, hey, that's really seems like a neat thing, or like, I like that jewel that you're wearing on your lapel. What's that about? And you notice from the older Masons, you usually get what? Well, I can't tell you about it, right? We've all experienced that. In this world of instant communication and even instant misrepresentation that can occur, it's important for us to ask questions, and it's important for us to give answers. So older Masons, my suggestion is, as some of the older Masons in Missouri that were my mentors learned, you know, we can tell Bill a little bit, and then he'll keep his mouth shut and wait for it in patience for that due time. But it is important to say to someone, well, this is a process of invitation or election or whatever it may be. Or this is an honor that's achieved because you did something like this. How do you become a 33rd degree in the Southern jurisdiction or the Northern jurisdiction? It's a mystery, isn't it? We all know the process, but it makes no sense. I say that as a 33rd from the Southern jurisdiction. Why did I get the 33rd when someone else didn't? Who knows? But the point is, it is reasonable to explain to people what things are. And so in that, with regard to the Select Master degree, when the life or death decision between killing the king's chief advisor for the government versus the guy who is in effect the grand steward, he's the gatekeeper, right? You remember the duties of a steward, right? So we have at the door, we're going to kill the guy that has the most important position of protecting this system of arches that's underneath, below the temple, not above, below. It's connected to the secret vault that we're supposed to believe in. And it seems like we're the only people that know about it as Masons, that there's this secret vault. This life or death decision, what does King Solomon do? When they're alerted to Zabud's intrusion, do they order him killed immediately? No. Could have done that, would have been in the right, wouldn't they? From what we perceive to be the law. You don't go into this area or the Selected 27 area. The penalty is death. Penalty is not time out. It's death. This is a rule they made. And it's a rule greater than the rules of the government that Zabud is operating under. Remember, he's coming there to let the king know something important. He's doing government work. But the holy work of the Selected 27 is a greater purpose, has a greater strength, and has to be protected at all costs. So King Solomon turns to his two trusted advisors in the Selected 27. Now remember, they're all referred to as what? Our three grand masters. Ask yourself right now, grand masters of what? Have you ever thought about that? You know, you don't find many states that have three grand masters, do you? Minnesota, do you have three grand masters in the Grand Lodge? Do you have three grand masters in the Grand Council? No. So how are these three people all grand masters? That implies co-equal authority, a partnership, if you will. So this is something that is different than the way human government works. And it's emblematic or symbolic of the celestial government that the Select of 27. And I'm asserting this. This is my intuition telling you this. So there's no footnote here. But there is this fact that they're trying to emulate something for their system of leadership. And we see how it operates in the Select Master degree. They go back to the east of the ninth arch and they confer with each other, don't they? Now, how many of you, when you're on your way to a leadership position, whether it's in human government or in Masonic governments or in your church, and you're going to be the chairman of the board, the president, the worshipful master, the illustrious master, the high priest, or the eminent commander, what's your biggest obstacle? It's usually your two predecessors who are sitting on the sidelines saying, we didn't do it that way in my day. And what? The two guys behind you, right? You're not sure about that senior warden. You're not sure about that junior warden. That one guy can barely cook. And his girlfriend bakes lousy muffins. And so it's all up to you. You have to make the decisions. If this lodge or this church or this business is going to survive, it depends on you making the decision. And you sure don't need the advice of the guys that went on before you, because they didn't do that good a job, in your opinion. And it sure isn't going to be advice from the guys behind you, because you already doubt they're going to be very good. Now, notwithstanding the fact that the guys that came ahead of you had that same thought about you, but even knowing that, if you do, you still think that the way to run something is one-man decision. That's decisive. In Select Master, we find that's not the way to lead. Leadership is a process of receiving information and evaluating information and guiding. So you should, as King Solomon did, consult and confer with your equals. And my friends, I'm going to dare to suggest to you, by the very ritual and the craft, the junior warden is the one where the sun is at the meridian height. It's not the sun in the east. It's not the sun in the west. It's the one at the meridian height. Every junior warden is someone that is an equal to the senior warden and the worshipful master. And you go, but Bill, Claudia says it's up to the master. That's the master's decision. But he didn't say how that decision should be arrived at. He only told you where the responsibility was. In Select Master, we see that Hiram and Hiram of Tyre gave advice. Well, our number's full. I don't see any way we can avoid this. So now King Solomon can proceed to the life or death decision. It's going to be death, right? But then new evidence, and this will vary from state to state, but the new evidence comes forward. Either a defender, the conductor, the counselor, someone, or the candidate himself through one of those officers. Here's why I came through the door. And he doesn't try to shift blame to a Hishar. That's another important leadership principle. But he makes it obvious that a Hishar didn't try to stop him. Now, Zabud did wrong because he should have stopped and announced himself and maybe awakened a Hishar, right? Then a Hishar should have said, I'll let the king know that you're here. Stay here. Don't enter. That would have been proper, right? And is there anyone here that agree? You know, you can see that would have kept it from being death, right? But Zabud didn't do that. To some extent, maybe he overlooked that opportunity to knock 3 times, to receive an answer, to be guided by a friend, as we see in the craft degrees. But nevertheless, he had a good intent on why he came through that door. Who points this out to King Solomon? One of the Hirims, right? These principles have been used in real life. I know it's often portrayed by the television pundits that presidents make decisions and governors make decisions all on their own. No, that's not the way it works. If you ever watched any episodes of The West Wing, it's closer to that. There's advisors, and they will debate the issues of the day in making recommendations to the president or to the governor. And you go, well, that's a weak way to make decisions. Well, you know what? It may be weak, but then again, it's the strongest way, because we've seen it time after time within the Bible, within the very concept of a Trinity, a Trinitarian Godhead that is found in the Knights Templar and implied throughout the rest of our teachings in Bible. There is a creative force that comes together, but it comes together in unison. United decisions, united actions have greater force than singular actions. You can find that in the Select Master degree. You say, well, Bill, you're kind of overthinking this degree. There was a Cryptic Mason from the state of Missouri who was Grand Master of the Grand Lodge. He used these principles that he had learned in Select Master while he was Grand Master of the Grand Lodge. It was acknowledged that many great things were achieved during his 1 year as Grand Master. The Missouri Lodge of Research, which has some claim to fame and recognition around this country, was created under his administration. It had been blocked by Grand Lodge vote 6 times before that. He brought everybody together. And more importantly, he used strategy. Every Cryptic Mason that was a past master of a lodge attended the session in which he was advanced to Grand Master and the session that approved that Lodge of Research. He did it using these principles of leadership. When you're master of a lodge, all too often, there's a tendency to say, you know, that senior warden, he never can get his lines right. I'm working to get my lines right, to get this thing opened efficiently and correctly. to open the magic circle, if you will. And he's just ruining it. And that junior warden, he's just silly. Now, I know none of you want to admit you've had these thoughts. But I'll come forth, hi, I'm Bill. I'm a doubter. I've doubted people that were ahead of me. I've doubted the people behind me. It's okay to admit it's human nature. Is it better to be a believer? Oh, yes, much better. But we face, in these times of challenges, how many times do you have a situation in Masonry where you have a leader, oh man, he was a great master, we got things done his year, and then the next year it falls off the cliff, right? It just drops, nothing. And then suddenly that lodge that was growing or was surviving is on its way downhill. It's because, in my mind, the other leaders, those that were to come from the future, the senior warden, the junior warden, all the way down that line, they were not engaged. They were not consulted. They weren't taught how to make decisions. So you can see why I have that feeling about Select Master as being a leadership degree. It is, in fact, consistent with my belief in theory. And this you're not going to find in the history books. But doesn't it strike you that since we know now, after 300 years of being told something completely different, at a time before the ancients and moderns had their little dispute in England, there were only 2 degrees: entered apprentice and fellowcraft. Yet there were master masons. How did they achieve the title of master mason if there's no 3rd degree? Because they ran a lodge. And every Royal Arch Mason of that time, or Irish Mason of that time, was a past master. Every Knight Templar, because they had to be a Royal Arch Mason. Every knight, every Sir Knight was a past master of a lodge. Look how far we've come from that. It's very democratic. But until the 50s, to be a member of a Royal Arch chapter in the United States, you had to be past master of a lodge. That changed. And I'm not against that change. I'm just saying, think of how that changes the way those organizations operate. Why was it important to be master of a lodge? And there's some of us that may never be a master of a lodge. It happens. But you have those opportunities for leadership. If it's not in an actual office, elected or appointed, there's committees and other things where you can exemplify and use these leadership principles. Oh, the days of one-man committees. I hate one-man committees. Why did I appoint you committee chair if you don't have a committee? I can get your advice individually. But all too often, what do we see with committees? Why are they ineffective? Is it because, oh, you can't have three or more people and get a decision? No, it's because nobody knows how to guide that decision and bring about a consensus. Look to the Select Master degree. Look to what King Solomon did. Was he any less sovereign over the kingdom of Israel because he consulted with the 2 Hirims? No. And was a better result achieved? Well, not from a Hishar standpoint, but from Zabud's standpoint, yeah, the right decision was made. And we can go in at another time the whole process of why the selective 27. Remember, my friends, 9 is a quorum, but 27 is the correct size of a York Rite body. It's in our ritual. So the number 9 is 1/3 of 27. And that's important because all too often people try to start a Masonic body with 9 people and not 27. And if you look to how your lodges and councils and chapters and commanderies are created, usually it's going to be more than that because they've tried to keep some semblance of that. So with that, I urge you to take another look at the Select Master degree. I urge you to consider the possible lessons there that you can use every day, and you can use them in leadership. I note finally this, structurally, the only Masonic body that is ruled by a board is the General Grand Council. There are some things that are left to the General Grand Master, but most decisions, financial and otherwise, have to require a majority vote of the Board of Trustees. It's not true of the other bodies. But that's because we have it structurally built in. We're following the principles of the Select Master degree. David, I would take questions or argument or whatever at this time.